I know it's April, it's even the end of April, and I haven't done my What I Read in March video yet, but yeah, I thought better late than never, so that's why I'm doing my What I Read in March video now, and I'll try to remember the stories. I have to say, books that I read at the beginning of March, I really had to look the story up again because it's been so long, but I definitely remember if I liked the books. So I thought I would still do the video because I said in January that I would do this challenge of doing a video every month about what I read. So I'm going to keep this promise. Even if the video comes a month later, it's better than not doing it. And yeah, I actually read amazing books in March as well as in April. I actually can't wait to do my What I Read in April video, which is also which I should do soon as well, because I mean in February I did not enjoy all the books that much, but in March and April I read amazing books that I can't wait to talk about them. So yeah, let's get started with what I read in March. So the first book I read at the beginning of March was Almond by Son Wong-pyung, I think. Sorry for the name again. And I loved it so much. I can't even express how incredible this book was. It's the one I probably remember the most. Well, there's another one, but I think this one with the German book that I will show you later those two were my favorite books of the month. And oh my goodness, I think I read this one in one day, honestly. It's a really short read, really comfortable to read. And it's such a good story. It is very easily written. And it reminded me of not Breasts and Eggs, of Heaven by Miko Kawakami. I think I talked about it in my January video. And it had a similar story in a way. I think the way it was written was also rather similar. So Almond is a story about a boy with a brain condition. So it starts with his childhood, and then the story continues as a teenager. And so it's a boy called Yoonjae. I'm sorry, I don't really have trouble with these names. And Yoonjae has a brain condition called alexithymia. So it is not autism, but it is similar in the way that he has trouble having emotions. So he can't really feel fear or anger. And it is not autism because he's not necessarily smarter than other kids. He just can't feel. And the reason why is because of the two almond-shaped things in the back of the brain. And that's why the book is called Almond. And so the story is, I mean, I really cried at the end because I thought it was so beautifully narrated and the story was so peculiar, so creative. It was just so basically it talks about how his mom and grandmother raised him, and how with what they struggled, what he struggled as a child with his illness. And then one day something very terrible happens in his life, and he ends up being alone and has to go to school. He really struggles because he has no one. He has no help from a parent to help him go through life with his illness. And that's when a boy comes into his life called Gon, and he is the biggest bully ever. So that's why I talked about Heaven from Miko Kawakami, because it's also about bullying. And it's just, the thing is, his bullies him so hard, but he never feels anything. So he starts being annoyed about him not reacting to the bullying, and they eventually become friends, and it is the best thing ever. I can't tell you how happy I was when they started bonding together, and how Gon started to care about him. And later there is also a love story with a girl and it's this relationship with this girl, and also with this baker, right? It was the baker, who tries to take care of him because obviously he's alone. And it's just such a beautiful story about, it's great because it's about, bullying again, and also about, being different, you know, and how to, find your place in the world, how to grow up when you're, not like other kids. And I know it's just a topic that is very dear to me, not necessarily because I also was different, but just because, I don't know, it's just a topic that fascinates me. That's why Lonely Castle in the Mirror and Heaven were just books that I really loved. I think it's just such an important topic, especially when you're a young adult. You will relate, because I think, if you went to school, you will understand. You will have lived these experiences. Not like this kid in the book, but you know, I think it's something everyone kind of relates to in a way, even if you're not autistic, or if you're different or experiencing bullying in school, I think, or just have trouble growing up and understanding, how to grow up. You know, I think it's just really great. And I actually never heard of this illness called alexithymia. Is it alexithymia? I think I wrote it down. Alexithymia. I gave this book, I need to check on Goodreads, but I think I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. It would even be 4.5 out of 5 stars. It's just, I would read it again. It's such a fun read. So definitely recommend Almond. The next book I read was Bliss, Montage by Lingma. So it's the first book from Lingma I read, and it's it's a short story book. So there are 10 short stories, I think, and I did not really like it. So what I do like about Bliss Montage though is that the stories are so absurd in a way. Like, you start reading the first short story and you're already in such a state, in a surrealistic, it's not even surrealistic, it's just so, it's a story that you'll never be in. So compared to other short stories I've read, this is definitely one that I think it's not relatable at all, but I think that's also what makes it the charm of the book, is that it's not relatable, I think. So an example, I remember reading it and then going to the chapter called, wait, let me see if I can find it, just a second. It's called Yeti Lovemaking. And then it just talks about the main character having a relationship with a Yeti, but the Yeti is actually a normal person, but also not. He's a Yeti. I don't know how else to explain it. But you understand, I think, what I mean by it's just something that is not really relatable. But I think there are some fun moments in the book. I think it's really rather witty. It's about a rich woman who's married to a rich man in Los Angeles, and they have this big house where all her exes live in. It's such a weird story, but I mean, the thing is, I really struggle with the genre of short stories. I have a problem with short stories that I think, they have to be very captivating, and they have to be captivating after the first page for me, because every time you start a new short stories, you have to get into it again. There are new characters. It's a complete different stories, and I think I struggle with that, because what I love about books is that it takes a few pages for you to understand everything, what is going on, where they are, how the characters are, who they are, you know. And with short stories, it's just so much information all the time, and you have to get the context again. So I think that's something I struggle with when I read short stories. But actually, I talked with someone last week, and I think the thing with short stories is the way to read it is probably just one story. And I think that is my problem with books, is that I usually read one book in one go, you know, and that's probably why I struggle with short stories, because short stories are meant to be, you know, read, you know, they need to be read like maybe once a week. You can open the book and read a new story of the book, and I think that's maybe what I should try to do in the future if I read more short stories. But I think Lingma has such an interesting writing style that is very different from other books. Oh yeah, there's one thing I remember now that I think is really great and creative about the book, is that when her husband talks in the book, you don't really see, just a second, I need to find, oh yeah, so when her husband talks, let me see if it can focus. He just talks in dollar bills, and I think that's such a creative thing that to do as a writer. I really loved that. That was really great. So I think, yeah, for the short story genre, it wasn't that bad. Did I enjoy it? It was okay. I wasn't that excited to open the book and continue reading, but it was alright. So I would probably give, I don't know, I might have given it 2 stars out of 5, but maybe it deserved 3 stars for the writing and the creativity, because the stories were really great. Yeah. So the next book, it's actually really interesting. So if you've followed and watched the other videos I made, then you know that Haruki Murakami is my favorite author of all time, and there are still some books from Murakami that I need to read, and I just picked a random Murakami book this month because I was in the mood for a new Murakami book, and so I picked The Elephant Vanishes. And yeah, it turned out to be short stories. I could have read the back, but I never do that. So I realized that I bought a book of short stories, which is great because I was able to compare the two different short story books, and what can I say? It made the difference for me. This was a 4 out of 5 stars because Murakami just never misses for me. He just delivers. And boy did he deliver with these short stories. All the short stories were such a bliss, and so I already said it in my other videos, but he just does it so well to create surrealistic, dreamlike elements in very normal general situations. I mean, it's just it's unmatched. I can't find another author like Murakami. I mean, there are lots of Japanese authors that try to be Murakami, and I also really like their books, but it's just he is the king for that. He's the best. And yeah, I think that's also what made the difference when I compared Bliss Montage to The Elephant Vanishes, is that Murakami's short stories, as surrealistic as they are, because they are as surrealistic as someone making love to a Yeti, there are even weirder things, much weirder things in this book. But I think what makes the difference is that no matter how surreal it gets, you can relate and you feel like you're in the stories and you are these characters. Yeah, and I think that's the difference for me, because in other short story books I read, the problem I had, they weren't relatable. And here, no matter how weird it gets, even if a green little monster is in love with a woman who can't sleep, I think, who sees the green monster in her sleep, I can't remember the story exactly because it's been a while, it feels like, yeah, you're there, it's relatable. And I think, yeah, that's really Murakami's strength here in this book. My favorite story, I did love The Elephant Vanishes story. So it's about a man that suddenly realized that his favorite elephant has disappeared, and it's a mystery because he just suddenly isn't there anymore. It's just such a weird thing. I don't know how I really wonder how Murakami comes up with these stories, because yeah, that's peak storytelling. Like, it's so good. He's my idol when it comes to writing. I wish that one day I could write like him, because I can't come up with stories like him. My favorite story was probably, there were two, so if you read the book, you'll know. It's one is about customer service, a guy that works in customer service and suddenly feels a bond with a woman that wrote an email, a complaint. And instead of just writing an email of complaint, he writes her an entire letter, like a love letter. But then he decides to not write a letter, but to record it and then give the cassette to her. I can't really explain it. You have to read it to understand, but it's such a good story. It's incredible. It's basically, the short story is just this customer service guy making basically like a WhatsApp memo to himself and just talking to a woman he's never met and talking about how he finds her so attractive and how he wants to sleep with her, even though the woman doesn't even know him. So it's such a good story. I had so much fun reading it. And the other one I loved so much was about a woman who has a problem sleeping, and she hasn't slept in days, and then she starts picking up Anna Karenina from Tolstoy. And I really love this story because I know some might not understand and not like the story as much, but the reason why I love this story so much was that Anna Karenina was the first book I ever read. So I read Anna Karenina when I was 14, and it was the first big literary book that I read. And that's why it really has a big place in my heart. And the thing is, I thought about Anna Karenina a few weeks ago and thought I don't really remember the story that much. Like, obviously the thing we remember is that, spoiler, like Anna Karenina kills herself, and there's a train scene, and then there's what's his name? Lenin, right? Lenin is his name. And then, so the thing is, I realized I need to reread Anna Karenina, and that's exactly the thought that this woman had in this short story, that it's been a while since she really read Anna Karenina, and then she just starts reading the entire book every night because she can't sleep. And I just really love this story. So if you like short stories and you really want some surrealistic, dreamy stories that are very funny, then you would love this. It's a great book, especially if you go to a little cafe to read just one little story. That's what I did. It was pure bliss. I already feel nostalgic about it. Right, so the next book I read was from a new author that I had heard about her before, but so basically she wrote the 4 season. So she wrote 4 books about the 4 seasons. So autumn, what am I thinking about? Autumn, summer, winter, and spring. And I decided to start with this new book that came out from Ali Smith. So she's a rather famous author at the moment. And her latest book, I believe this is her latest book, is Companion Piece. So that's the first book I read from Ali Smith. Will I read more Ali Smith after this book? I think so, yes. So I did like this book, but there are things that I also struggled with. That for me, in order to have a good book, it needs to be, I just need this feeling of excitement every time I open it, and or this feeling of being interested in what is happening next, or just interested in what I'm about to read. And that wasn't always the case, because this book was sometimes really hard to follow. But Ali Smith is really great in her style is really, really unique. And so Companion Piece is a very recent story about an artist called Sandy Gray, And it is set during the pandemic, so I think that's definitely an element that makes this book interesting, because it's the first book, I think, it's hard to say, but I think it's the first book I read that is about the pandemic. You know, it feels really weird. It's basically like movies that are during the pandemic era, you know. It feels really strange because we lived through it, you know, and now it's already something in the past. So I remember feeling that way when I watched Glass Onion this winter, you know, the movie, because it is also set during the COVID period, and they all have masks, and it feels really weird to see it on screen. So it was really, it felt really nice to read about it for the first time, but it is not in a normal way. That's what is also great, because in the book, her father, the protagonist's father, is in the hospital, but she always says that it's not the virus, and the main character is also really aware of the virus and really wants to tries to not catch corona, so she's really cautious about it, and also wears masks as soon as someone approaches her house, you know. And the other characters in the book don't care at all. So there are two young teenagers and talk about it. So since the book is so recent, there are also lots of, that's what I love about the writing. It's really modern, but not in an annoying way. So usually I hate it when books talk about social media and TikTok and all that, but honestly it didn't bother me much in this book, because this book is so poetic, and it has really, the prose in it is so, it has a good combination between an old writing style and a more modern one. I think that's what makes it great. There's lots of poetry as well in this book, and I try to remember a lot about this book, because it was a long time ago. But I'm really interested in Ali Smith's other books, because there are an element that I really liked is the guests that appear in the stories. There are always unexpected guests in the book, and when I read on Goodreads, when I read some good reviews, I saw that it's an element that is common for Ali Smith's books to have unexpected guests, and I thought that was a great element. So the unexpected guests is this new family and those two quite annoying teenage girls and it's also nice because it really is like it talks about, it's very socio-political, so it has a lot of political talks in this book, so that's not necessarily something I like, but I also like the fact that it talks about isolation, because it's obviously a period that we all felt differently, but I think the feeling of being isolated, being alone, and not wanting to have company necessarily. So she gets a call from someone she hasn't talked to in years about a problem she had at an airport. It's a very, the setting of the story is very, very strange, very odd, but it all fits together. I think, it is a great book, but I think it felt a bit more fragmental to me, so it felt more like fragments of a story rather than a very smooth storytelling. So that's probably what I struggled most with this book, but overall I think it was great. What I loved most was all the different references, all the poetry, mentions of poetry. So I remember there was a chapter about the analysis of a poem. It was for a uni class, and then she's helping one of her classmates at uni with an essay they have to write, or an analysis they have to do about the poem, and that was such a lovely chapter. I really enjoyed reading. So overall I would probably give it 3 stars out of 5. It wasn't bad, but I'm curious to know how the other books from her are. The next book I read, it's a bit complicated because I don't remember it that well, because I remember reading it in one go. So this book only has 100 pages, so really it's a fast read. It's called The Last Children of Tokyo, and it's by Yoko Tawada. It's also the first book I read from Yoko Tawada, and there's another one I really want to read from him. So if I get the opportunity soon, I might be reading it. So yeah, that was a lovely book, especially because obviously I'm very fond of Japan and I've never been, but also like I've been really interested lately in the history of Japan. And yeah, it's something I talked about at work as well, about, you know, the Japanese culture and how the different generations, you know, how they have to adapt, like especially the older generation, the older Japanese people, how they feel about the new Japan, you know, the new world. And that's basically what this book is about. So The Last Children of Tokyo, so it's about a very old Japanese man called Yoshiro, and he's over 100 years old. He's 105, and he has to raise his great grandson because their parents are gone. It's so yeah, you see, it's really interesting because it talks about a dystopian, futuristic Japan compared to the old Japan, and it does that so beautifully. What I instantly liked about this book is that it was linguistically so interesting, and I feel like I haven't really searched, but it appears to me that Tawada, the writer, is really into linguistics, because he really talks about the roots of kanji words, about what the kanjis originally meant, what old words that were used that young Japanese people don't say anymore. So that's something that I loved about this book, because I obviously learned Japanese. I'm studying Japanese, so yeah, I thought that was so great to have someone in this book explain like that we used to say these words in Japanese that now nobody says anymore, and that was really great. And yeah, it was so well written. I think to have two characters that are so from complete different Japanese generations. I loved how Yoshiro, the main character, talked about how different Japan was back then. How, for example, how fruits, how it's so difficult now to find good fruits in Tokyo, because Okinawa, which is where most fruits come from, are now so shut from the rest of Tokyo, from the rest of Japan. And there are things that I just didn't know that I think are great too, that I wanted to understand, and this book really made me understand how different Japan is now. So I thought that was really great. I didn't realize how Okinawa as an island, obviously it's an island in an island, you know, it's really more shut down compared to the rest of Japan. And it wasn't usually that, and that's what the main character says in the book, that Japan really had to shut itself down from the rest of the world after all the historical events that happened. And it's also really nice to see from an older Japanese man's perspective, to see how he feels about the new generation, and how he says that the young Japanese generation struggles so much. And I think it's nice to see and to read about it, because you hear all the time how the young generation has it so much easier, but no, this book actually says the opposite. So his great grandson has also an illness. He's called Mumei, and he doesn't know if he's going to grow up, and that's a struggle in the book. That is, Yoshiro says that the old Japanese generation, they grow old and they never die, and the young generation, they die younger and younger. So it's really not as you would think. And he says that for the younger generation, it's really hard to be in Japan and to grow up there, much harder than it was for them before. And so I think it's a great read. It's also a short read, so if you like Japan and history, and also if you're studying Japanese, I think for the linguistic aspect of it, it's really great. So I would, yeah, definitely recommend The Last Children of Tokyo, and I'll let you know if I read a new Yoko Tawada book. Okay, last but not least, I finally read a classic, which I have been meaning to read for years, okay? It's Stefan Zweig, Die Schachnovelle. It's, let me think, I think the title is Chess, simply Chess in English. It's my first Stefan Zweig book. I know it's a pity that I haven't read any Stefan Zweig yet. I love German literature so much, and yeah, it's been a while since I read a good German book, and my goodness, I needed this. You know what, I loved it so much that I annotated the book, and I don't like annotating books, so the fact that I annotated this really shows how much I loved it. It's 5 out of 5 stars for me. It's probably one of my favorite books of all time now, I'm not kidding. I know it's maybe mainstream to say because it's really one of the most famous German novels ever. It's so perfect. There's literally not one sentence in this book that is out of place, that is like, that shouldn't be here. Every single word in this novel is supposed to be there, you know? It's so perfect. It's incredible. I can't explain, like, I read I watched a YouTube video. It's a German channel that is basically doing summaries about all the classic books you can imagine. And even he in this video said to the younger generation that it's like, please don't watch summaries of this, because you just read Die Schachnovelle, because it's, first of all, such a short read. You can read it in 3 hours, and it is so worth it. If you don't like reading, but yeah, this is worth it. Yeah, I can only say it again. It's just 3 hours of your life, and it is a life-changing book. Like, the historical context of it and the context of the writer Stefan Zweig, he wrote this book a few months before he killed himself. Like, he died the same year this came out, I think, right? The same year, within a year later. Yeah, during the Second World War. And that makes this book even better for me, because in the book itself you can see how Stefan Zweig felt during the 1940s, and you can feel the tension and how awful and terrific this period, terrifying, not terrific, how terrifying this period was. Yeah, I was blown away by it, because it's such a short story, but it didn't need to be longer or shorter. In a way, yes, I would have liked to have an actual interview between the pro chess player and the protagonist, whom we don't know the name of. We don't know the name of the narrator. I mean, not the protagonist, the narrator. I actually thought when I started reading that this would be about him, about the professional world champion. It turned out not to be about him, but yeah, that's something I maybe would have been interested in, like, knowing more about him as well. But obviously the main story about this wait, what's his name? My goodness. So yeah, the entire story with Dr. B, about Dr. B, his life. I mean, it's probably one of the best stories, like, regarding World War II and Germany before, like, 1939, I think. You know, I mean, the way the imageries are so clear in this story. You really, like, when I was in this isolated room in, was it Austria or Germany now? I can't remember. I think it was in Austria, right? Because obviously Stefan Zweig is Austrian, like me. But I think it was in Austria that, yeah, you know, I was with him in this isolated room with nothing. and it was so spooky, and really I almost had goosebumps reading it, because I really felt how awful it must have felt to be isolated with absolutely nothing but yourself and your own thoughts without having a book. And the relief you had while you read, when he finally had this book to read and started playing chess with himself alone. As someone who is isolated, and pretty much, not isolated is the wrong word, but as someone who is alone all the time, I felt, yeah, it felt so not relatable, but you know, yeah, I understand how much you need books when you're alone, because yeah, I mean, obviously I'm alone with myself, but I'm entertained with books and thoughts, you know. But you know, yeah, the way he had to start playing chess with himself, and basically had started developing a split personality, his black self and his white self, to play chess, you know. I mean, that's just incredible. This book is perfect, like historically speaking, politically speaking, psychologically speaking. I mean, Sigmund Freud and Stefan Zweig were really close friends as well, you know, as well as Thomas Mann as well, right? So they were in this circle, and yeah, I understand why, because my goodness, Stefan Zweig is such a great author, and I can't wait to read other novels by Stefan Zweig, so I will definitely do so in the future. And I want to read it again. Honestly, the only thing I regret is that we didn't read it in school, because I would have loved to discuss it with other people. So I might discuss it with other people. I just haven't had the opportunity, because obviously I'm not going to school anymore. But yeah, it's really... This book and Almond were my two favorite books of the month, for sure. But as I said, I really enjoyed all the books I read. They were really fun reads, and yeah, so if you have the chance to be German, obviously read Schachnovelle in German, and I don't know if the English translation is good, but it should be. I mean, it's such a known novel, so yeah. This is worth it. If you have to read one book from this month, then it should be Schachnovelle. Right, so those were the books that I read in March. Yeah, as I said, I really enjoyed reading in March. It was really a great month for books, and so was April, because yes, it's April already, and I really can't wait to do my April book review, because there were so many amazing books I read in April. So I'm really excited to do that video, and yeah, that's it. And yeah, see you soon for the April video, because yeah, I might do the video tomorrow. So yeah, I can't wait to see what I read next.